Morning. Thank you. Due to time constraints, we are going to start the second clinical section. So I would like to introduce myself. I am Quentin Buerta, the product manager for the VTE Prevention Division for Arjo Africa. And many of you would have had experience in the past that quite a lot of the VTE prevention education that Arjo has provided has been geared quite a lot in regards to the tools that you need to enable you at the end of the day to prevent blood clots from developing with your patients. But today is not going to be the same day following the same recipe. We have decided to change it a little bit around because at the end of the day, VTE prevention is not only about stopping blood clots for your patients when they are admitted to your facilities, but it's also incredibly important to understand that you play an important role in the facility as well when it comes to VTE prevention. And therefore, the topic for today is about you, protecting you from when your patient develops a hospital-acquired VTE. And therefore, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to the speaker for the session, Febe Bruwer. She needs actually no introduction. She's quite well known in the clinical education sector. And I believe that you are going to find her session quite insightful. It's going to be all about your professional ethos, about the medical legal aspect in your facilities, and also when it comes to directly addressing adverse events and preventable adverse events. So without any further ado, if anybody has taken their seats, I'm going to give over to Febe Bruwer. Thank you.
Hello everybody. Thank you, Quentin, for the introduction. I don't know whether I'm notorious or famous, I'm not sure yet. Thank you to Arjo for this initiative, and thank you for organizing this day. Thank you for attending. I know it's a bit tedious to come and sit and listen to someone. Please don't fall asleep, and if you do, don't snore too loud, please. I'll try and wake you. I'll try and keep you awake. The minute you see medical legal, I know, everybody goes, ugh, what on earth is she going to talk about? We know everything and we work according to the book, but sometimes we forget stuff and sometimes we lose sight of things. So the talk today is not going to tell you what you've been doing wrong. The aim of today's presentation is to tell you, firstly, I want to say I salute you. As a nurse, as a colleague, I say thank you. And then I want to say the message I want to bring across to you is take control of the fact that we have authority to be our patient's advocate. And if that's the only sentence you remember from this whole thing, then I'll be happy. We still need to stand up for our patients and we need to empower ourselves with knowledge. So without further ado, why are we here today? Why do you need to be informed about this? Why is it important? Why is it relevant to you? And only you will be able to answer these questions afterwards. So, Vijay said you can take photos of the screen. You just need to edit me out, please. The kids will think you're... So what are we going to discuss? Firstly, we're going to look a little bit at what is a preventable adverse event. What are we going to look at? Why we need to do something, and what is within our framework. And then what is it when we go outside of our scope of practice? And who's responsible and who's to blame? I always tell my kids I'm a very responsible person because if something goes wrong, I'm probably responsible. So, and then how do we know when we are doing things wrong or when we are doing things right? How do we measure quality? It's difficult. I know if you work in the hospital, I must give you a little bit of context. My husband always says when I start a story, I sort of go all the way to Cape Town and come back. But my defense is usually it's context. I need to explain the whole story so that you understand. Although I don't work in a hospital anymore, my practice is in a hospital. And we have seen the aftermath of when patients develop DVTs many times over. And unfortunately, I was in a position in my practice where we had to resuscitate a patient that shot a pulmonary embolism in the practice. And I want to tell you that that is not the nicest thing to do ever. I do not wish it upon anybody. So if we can prevent it, if you can play a small key role in preventing something, if you can stop it from happening by doing a few simple things, then you will make a huge difference in someone's life. And it's not about changing the world, but if you can change something for someone, it might just change their world. So, and I'm not also philosophical. So knowledge is power. When I used to work in ICU, that was one of the first things our charge sister taught us. Knowledge is power. Learn, learn. Never, ever, ever stop learning. Why? Because we work with people, humans. We have human lives in our hands. The practice of medicine or nursing is capable of rendering a noble service to humanity, providing due care, sincerity, efficiency, with professional skill. You don't get skill by watching a YouTube video. You don't. The doing, it's hands-on, learning, reading. We have access to so much more. I'm sure a lot of you in the room are much younger than I am. I do see, I've met a few colleagues that have actually studied with me. But if we have so much available, you walk with a little computer in your hand the whole day. You have access to so much information. If I tell my kids we had to actually go to the library and then there was these little wooden boxes, you had to open and you have to go A, B, C, okay, I need B, and you open and you look for the little cards and then you go and look for the book somewhere on level 12. They do not have a clue what I'm talking about because they just press a little button and information. So it's amazing. You have access to information, use it. We also swore a pledge. Do you even remember that? The little lamp, Florence Nightingale. And it's a variation of the Hippocratic Oath. You swore you will do no harm. Maya Angelou has a quote that say, actually the Dalai Lama said, if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. So try that. Understanding the dynamics in the medical field. It changes continuously. If you stay stagnant and you don't learn and you don't update yourself, you stay there. You don't learn. We need to know the risks we are taking. We work with people. People are different. Each and every one of us has different needs and a whole different setup. So everybody's different. And we need to mitigate the risk. So we need to lessen the effect of the risk. And we can do that. It's within our power to do that. Take back control. Okay, so what is a preventable adverse event? So an adverse event is something terrible that happens. If you read a lot of clinical trials, you would have seen the word adverse event somewhere. If you read some clinical documents, you would have seen the word adverse event somewhere. So that's when harm comes to a patient during their medical care. We do something and they get hurt. We apply something, they get hurt. Or we don't applies something and they get hurt. So if it's connected to what we do, then surely it should be preventable. I know not everything is preventable. There's quite a lot of studies, I think Catherine can also reiterate that, there's quite a lot of studies that they're talking about preventable pressure injuries. You can't prevent them. Unavoidable, that's the word. No, sorry, you had now Catherine with her beautiful Canadian accent, and then you get me. Oh, shame. I'm Afrikaans and I'm South African. You can hear that wherever you go in the world. And then somewhere during the talk, the English is like airtime. It runs out. But at least in South Africa, we can understand quite a few languages. So adverse events happen when the wrong treatment is applied or the right treatment incorrectly. So we can think we're doing the right thing, but when we do it incorrectly, it will also have not the best effect. Okay. So like if you go outside and lightning strikes you, it can be preventable. Don't go outside if there's lightning. Okay. So why do we need to be informed? Why is it necessary to know this? Because it provides education and consultation. Education, education, education. I mean, even Nelson Mandela reiterated this whole idea of being educated. And I think in South Africa, if we can make education more available, I'm not going to do the fees fall thing now. I'm just going to, if we educate our people, if we up the standard, we will learn to work together better. Things will be better. If you educate yourself, you will be better. The cost is minimal and the benefit is endless if you are educated. There's more benefit to it. It inspires confidence. If you know that you know that you know, then you know. So revisiting the framework refreshes the duty of responsibility. Now there's a few words in our scope of practice that stands out. I'll read them to you just now. Responsibility and accountability. I'm taking responsibility and I'm accountable for what I do. So it's easy to hide behind big corporates and, I just work here. As a nurse, you don't just work there. You're not just a nurse. I get very, very upset if someone puts the word just in front of nurse. You are never ever just a nurse. You are a nurse. And you have the right to take accountability and responsibility. It's leadership support. If we educate ourselves, we can become leaders. It mitigates the risk, and you'll hear this mitigate word a lot. It's a very nice word. In the last few years, I've learned very interesting words, and the one word that I can still not quite understand is the word criminality. But, okay. I didn't know that you can change an act into an adjective. But you learn English as you go along. And it cultivates a culture of informed responsibility. You know what to do. You know what you are responsible for. We tend to forget stuff like that. We go to work, we're totally overwhelmed with paperwork. I hate paperwork. I hate admin. But we need to do it. Every time I have to write all those reports, I have to keep on reminding myself, just do this, just get through this. Because we'll get to documentation later. And if I'm talking way too much, you must tell me. I can get a little bit sidetracked. The kids say I have ADHD, but that's a possibility. So if we do not follow the rules, we end up with medico-legal issues. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these. I don't get to watch soapies anymore, but I don't know if it's even a thing anymore. Seven Alone, or one of those, or Bold and the Beautiful, something like that. You know, you watch the soapy, and then the family storms into the room and says, "We're going to sue the doctor." And then in the end, in the court battle, it's the nurse that's in front of the firing line, because we're responsible. So medical legal issues arise when there's an act, you do something or you don't do something. When you fail to do something, when you are careless, when you are negligent. And there's a few different variations of negligence as well. Like you can be gross negligent or just have a select negligence. But negligence is negligence. You didn't do what you're supposed to do. Or the inability of a healthcare professional in discharging professional obligations. I know these are like a lot of legal terms, and it sounds very boring, but I've been involved in quite a few court cases, and it's not nice. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, if someone showed this nurse what to do, if someone actually educated her maybe, would it be different? Would she have done things differently? Yes, if she knew. But now ignorance is not an excuse. That's why we need to empower ourselves. It also involves the application of medical knowledge in the administration of justice. Now that sounds almost like you actually studied a law degree and not nursing, but no. In our scope, they describe the words justice, being just, being fair, being honorable, being honest, all those words. And it can lead to morbidity and mortality if we don't do what we're supposed to do. The best way to handle a medical legal issue is to prevent it. It's the same with pressure injuries. The best treatment is prevention. We don't want them. I treat them. It is costly, it's painful, it's degrading, it's uncomfortable, it has a socioeconomic impact that no one can ever put a value on. You know that MasterCard advert, the price listing. So what is our professional code of ethics? Do you know, have you read it in our Nursing Act? We have a code of ethics. And there's a few words that stood out for me. Knowledge, making sure that you know. Insight into what is your duties and obligations. Whether you work in surgical, medical, ICU, trauma, cardiac, I don't know how many units they've divided up. We have medical, surgical, maternity, pediatrics, and the biggest wing, the psychiatric wing. That's interesting. We need to protect not only your patient, yourself. You need to protect your patient and yourself. Against what? It was interesting the other day, I sort of looked through some of the old documents we have in our SOP file, and there's a statement from government on harassing nursing staff that they can put up in the hospital so that patients don't harass nursing staff. So I'm sure you've experienced that, but it's your obligation to protect yourself and your patient. It doesn't matter where they are and who they are. once again, going back quite a few years ago, the charge to stay in ICU. Sometimes patients get disorientated, they get aggressive. Even in the old age homes, the Alzheimer's patients, they're sometimes aggressive to you. They seem to be abusive. And then the one day our charge sister said, just remember that this is not the real person. It's the disease behind the person. So respect the person, not the disease. So look beyond that. And for yourself, it's the same. We make mistakes when we're tired, you know? So look after yourself, protecting yourself and your patient. Ethical. That's also a word that people just throw around everywhere. You have to be ethical. What's ethical? Ethics, in our scope of practice, they describe ethics as being that you act non-maleficently. Now, that's not the one in the Disney movie, Maleficent. Not her. Non-maleficence. This requires a nurse to consciously refrain from doing harm. So now, it's difficult if you're under pressure, you still have like this load full of admin to do. There's a shortage of staff. You've had to be the cook, bottle washer, psychiatrist, doctor, everybody today. And the patience is running thin. Then it's difficult. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt quite a few times over. So I'm just here to remind you that within you, you have the power to do this. That's why you are here. Then, accountability and responsibility. We're there again. So we'll get to accountability and responsibility just now. I'll give you just a little bit. So what I said about the scope of practice and the few things that really stood out for me, specifically with regards to prevention of VTE, was advocate, competence, and comprehensive nursing. So I work in the wound clinic, so we get the patients afterwards. We get when they've had complications, when they have the wound, we see them. And it's always interesting to me that within the different interprofessional teams, we sort of work in little silos, and this person does that, and this person does that, and this one does that, and they don't talk to one another. So if I read the word, for instance, comprehensive nursing, I think of this whole person. And within wound care, we have a saying. You treat the whole person and not the hole in the person. Because you get the whole package. You get the whole package deal. You get the person and everybody else that comes along. The family, the spouse, the partner, the significant other. You get to deal with all of them, not only the patient. And in every scenario, you need to look at the patient as a whole. The patient comes in for some other surgery. Wonderful. And as a nurse, we like to hear what the three most important words: ambulant, independent, and alert. Don't have to worry about them. They'll be fine. But they don't come in like that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have needed our help. So go and read your Nursing Act. It's a tedious, very long document, and they've changed it a few times, but go and read it, just to refresh your memory. They describe nursing as being dynamic. It changes the whole time. What Florence Nightingale did, I'm not sure how many years ago, I know it's her birthday on the 12th of May. That what she did many, many years ago and what we do today are totally different, but the basics still remain the same. But it changes continuously. I'm sure if you've been in nursing long enough, what you do now and what you've done 10 years ago is also not the same, but the basic principles stay the same. We should use our good judgment. Now, I think to me, this is something like common sense. And the problem with common sense is that it's not actually so common. Common sense is something, that little voice in the back of your mind, asking you, is this the right thing to do? Is this the right patient, the right time, the right indication? Am I going to get into trouble if I don't do this? Nobody's watching. No, somebody's watching. My husband always says, if you have to ask so many questions, if you have to ratify your action, think again. This might not be the best thing to do then, or not to do. So it's not only what to do, it's what you don't do. So in the scope of practice, it also addresses context. Within the context, if you read a few law cases, some litigation, it's thick documents, but if you read through them, you can often see that it is about the context. It's not necessarily about the outcome, but it's within the context of that situation that someone's life changes irreversibly. So that we want to prevent. And we want to practice safely. In order to practice safely, we need to empower ourselves with knowledge. You can't practice safely if you don't know. Would you? So if you take your own child would you take your child to the lady at spa to check their vitals or do the immunization? No. She won't know. She might be able to watch it on YouTube, but she won't know. So when are we outside our scope? Now, I must be really honest with you. If you've read the Nursing Act lately, or recently, some things are really very vague. And that's where the problem comes in. If there's no specific things listed, but also in the treating humans, treating people, it's very difficult to be very specific. You have to be slightly vague, but it's there where the problem comes in because it can be interpreted. And in law, interpretation, the context, plays a huge role. When you sit there and you listen to accusations and the defendant, the nurse, has to defend herself against all the accusations. I get goosebumps because every time I've seen that, I actually just wanted to cry. Because it's sad that you get to see someone in such a situation where someone that started out as wanting to do good ends up in a situation where they are absolutely, you could rather just throw them in a lion's den. That would be more or less painful, I think. Just feed them to the lions. It's terrible. So make sure you don't end up there. So legal negligence in nursing comes when there's failure to use equipment in a responsible manner. See, responsible. You will walk out here and think, I don't want to hear that word again. Failure to assess and monitor and failure to communicate. We don't communicate. I can promise you that. Failure to document. My sentences get shorter and shorter as the day goes along. It starts off with a beautiful description of what I did and what the wound looked like and what I cleaned the wound was. And then as the day goes later, the sentences really get shorter and shorter. And sometimes you end up with cleaned and dressed. And then when you go back, you think, ooh, this will not suffice. I'll have to redo this. So then once again, you think, just do it right the first time. Then you don't have to go back. You don't have time for that. Failure to act as your patient's advocate. Now, once again, did you study law or nursing? But we are our patient's advocate. We stand there and we need to make choices for people that can't. We need to act on their behalf. And I know it's difficult. It took me years and years to get up the courage to actually say, no, I don't think this is a good idea. Because what do we usually say? No, dis reg, that's fine. Don't worry, we'll sort it out. Performing nursing procedures incorrectly. And sometimes it comes back to your training. Were you ever exposed to it? But if you know that you don't know, it's your responsibility to fix it. And failing to take appropriate precautions. Prevention is always better than cure. Always. So, negligence. I don't know what the time looks like. Hoe lank het ek nog? Sorry, I talk a lot. Okay, I'm still fine, apparently. Need to talk a little bit faster, I think. Okay, so medical treatment carries the risk of causing harm. We all know that. You can stick something that shouldn't be somewhere, you can cut off something, you can take out something, you can leave in something, you can make a patient fall, you can do all sorts of weird things. So that's where negligence comes in the sense that if you know that you're not doing the right thing, you shouldn't be doing it. But to prove negligence, it's very difficult. Like I said, I've been involved in quite a few court cases, and to prove negligence is very difficult. But, and we'll get to documentation, you can read that. If it's not written, it's not done. Remember. So if you stand in a court of law, the court will not judge you on being a reasonable person because you have a nursing diploma degree. You are then seen as a reasonable expert. So there's a certain expectation that you should have known. You should have prevented. You should have done something. You should have said something because you are the reasonable expert. That's why you have those epaulets on your shoulders. That's why you have that clinical knowledge. And that's where it becomes difficult because there's a certain expectation of what you should know. So make sure you know because ignorance is deemed negligence. You can't say, oh, I didn't know. SARS also don't accept that apology. So, when a person undertakes an activity which requires expert knowledge, we are experts because you have learned, you've done your training, knows or should know that he or she undertakes an activity that he lacks the necessary knowledge, that is negligent. You should know that you don't know. If you don't know, make sure you know. Because ignorance is not, is negligence. So yeah. Don't phone me on my day off. Not my problem. But what did you do yesterday? Or what didn't you do yesterday? So when things go wrong, who do we blame? I know who usually gets blamed. But then if you've worked like 3 7/7s in a row, and you have the kids and the husband or the wife or the spouse or the whatever, and you do things after work, you become tired. So then things like beneficence, responsibility, and accountability is difficult. No? Okay, so beneficence is about not causing harm. So our prime purpose in life is to help others, and if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. Try not to. So the principle of beneficence is our obligation to act within the benefit of the patient. I know that these words sometimes you have to sort of pull them apart to make sense of them, but that's how I also learn. I sort of put things in little boxes and I take them apart to try and make sense, because it has to make sense for you. Why do you want to work for the benefit of the patient? Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit faster and talk a little bit less. I'll try. So what is our responsibility? According to our scope of practice, our responsibility allows for the execution of treatment or administration of medication prescribed by an authorized registered person. So yes, I know, when you work in the ward, you wait for the doctor, physician, whoever, to come and prescribe. That's the law, that's how we work. But it's also your responsibility to prevent injury, illness, and disability. So you need to know what is being prescribed and whether that is the correct prescription. And if it's not, you need to speak up, because you are your patient's advocate. So responsibility and accountability. You are responsible and accountable for your actions based on your clinical training, your title, whether you are the unit manager. I still call the person in charge of the hospital, the matron. That sort of just slips out now and again. I know it's not referred to as the matron anymore. It's fancy titles now. But the person in charge. In your scope of practice, remember what you can and can't do, although it's slightly vague in some points, and policies and procedures within your facility. So making some changes within the hospital environment is difficult. Like I say, we tend to hide behind corporates, and now it's, the hospital said we should do it this way, and that makes it difficult, because the hospital also have accountability. But although you work for the hospital maybe, you still have your own personal accountability, responsibility. It's described as vicarious liability. The person higher than you carries the risk. But that should also make us more prone to respect the other person's responsibility and accountability, especially if they carry it for you. The charge sister in the unit, she will carry the runt. She will get it. She will get into trouble if something happens. She has to report back. She has to write the reports. Or he. So I'm sorry, I still don't know how to do the gender neutral thing. They, it, I'm not sure. And then liability. Who's liable? Whose fault is it anyway? That program, whose line is it anyway? In the end, they will ask you, what have you done, what haven't you done? Who's liable? Liable usually has a monetary value. So if you're liable, someone might, in a court of law, tell you, well, you now have to pay X amount. Or a monetary value can also be, you are liable, so you can't practice anymore. That weighs a lot more weight. So how do we stop this? How do we mitigate this? How do we prevent this? We change our attitudes. Now, changing an attitude is very difficult. I think it's one of the hardest things to do, change an attitude towards what is my responsibility, what do I need to do? Always do your best. Maya Angelou says, do your best until you know better, and then you do better. Apology. Personally, my personnel, if something goes wrong and they say, I'm sorry, I missed this, I didn't do this, but I will fix it. That carries a lot more weight than just going, oh, but she said that we can do it, and it was actually that other nurse, oh, it was night duty, shifting blame won't work. It doesn't have a good effect. Following clinical guidelines, that's even more difficult. Try implementing them. Documentation, see, we're back there again. Keeping updated, keeping yourself updated, expanding your knowledge, reading. Nighttime reading is not Mills and Boone or whatever. What's it, Daniel Steele? No, read an interesting article. Read something nice that's relevant to your practice, relevant to your clinical setting. The more you read, the more informed you become. Risk management, which we'll just cover in a few slides just now, and then informed consent. So I know you stick that little paper underneath the patient's, or you give them a little clipboard and you go, sir, just sign there, and there. There we go, all done. Quick and easy. And then afterwards in the court case, the patient says, oh, but they didn't explain that to me. I wasn't informed. And unfortunately for us, the court, 9 out of 10 times, the case goes to the plaintiff because you didn't explain. You didn't write in your notes that you explained to the patient, and the patient verbalized that he or she understood. Did you write that? No. Patient signed form. Print. Sign. Done. And then in a court of law, someone says, yeah, but did you actually explain? Did you do it? Informed consent is very, very, very important. And especially making sure that when you get the patient's informed consent, that they are actually informed and that you have proof that you have informed them. It's sad that we need to do that, but that's life. So getting to VTEs. So like I said, unfortunately, we get to see the sad part when the patient has had a DVT, when they come there, when they've had to have an amputation that is life-changing, when they have a huge ulcer, when they have a pressure injury, when they have wounds all over. So we get to see that part. So Quentin said I should have put in some of those gory pictures for you, but it's before lunch, so I don't know. So VET is a preventable adverse event. We've spoken about preventable adverse events. So we're just going to touch on prevalence, compliance, risk assessment, appropriate prophylaxis, and once again, documentation. So VETs is fairly common. And it's interesting that we actually do have data on that in South Africa. Try getting data on pressure injuries. The hospitals are like, I think the Central Intelligence Agency in America. So if we don't know that there's a problem, how are we going to fix it? How are we going to say, it's like, we ask, in the Wound Healing Association, we ask people, so what training did you do? And then nothing. So if we don't know what level of training you've done, how can we know where can we improve? It's not to say, oh, see, she hasn't done that training. It's not about that. It's about, we have a problem, let's fix it. Let's work together as a team. Let's fix this. We don't want the patient to come back 2, 3, 4 months later and have to have an amputation because we didn't do one small thing in hospital. We just ticked the little boxes and went, yes, 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 yes. Oh, no, you're fine. Move along, move along. Okay. So, the risk of VTE development in South African hospitals, 74%. Yo, that's high. So if your doctor tells you, ma'am, sir, you have a 74.6% of this operation not being a success, but don't worry. You'll go, whoa, 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 76%? That doesn't sound good. Will I live? Well, you have a 24% chance that you won't, so who's counting? That's high. So we can prevent this. We can make this zero. There's actually, I think it's in Abu Dhabi, a hospital, 0 pressure injuries, 0. And it's not because they hide the data somewhere. It's not because they're not telling us something. They do have 0 pressure injuries because they implemented some clinical procedures and they follow it to the line. If you overstep your bounds, you get into big trouble. I've recently been to Cuba. That's more or less the same. You do not say anything there. You do not have an opinion. In South Africa, we have an opinion. We can say something. We can do something. So according to the statistics, there's annually 20,000 deaths due to VTE, due to deep vein thrombosis. That's sad, 20,000 people. We worry about COVID. There's lots and lots of other problems we need to look at. So I'm not going to bore you with lots and lots of data. It's just to make you think that maybe you can change that 74%. No? Maybe you can be the one person that changes that. Who's the guy that says if you want to see change, be the change? I think it's Gandhi. No? If you want to see change, be the change. Don't stand on the sideline and just go, next time. But there is apparently a problem with compliance in South Africa with regards to VTE implementation, guidelines, risk assessment. So if you look at the data and you look at everything that is going wrong, why is there a problem with compliance? Is it a cost-benefit situation? Does the cost outweigh the benefit? I don't think so. Because if you look at the cost of treating a lower leg ulcer where the patient has had a DVT, and you look at preventing the DVT, that's much cheaper. I can promise you that. Treating a lower leg ulcer because the patient had a previous DVT can be hundreds of thousands of rands. And the personal cost, that is direct cost, indirect cost, huge. Job losses, and I'm not even talking about pulmonary embolisms and people that die. We don't even talk about that now. So direct cost and indirect cost to the patient and their families. So if we can prevent this, sort of not rocket science. I know this is quite a busy slide, but yeah, there's fundamental disputes about which risk assessment should be implemented and which not, and which is the best one. And at the end of the day, the patient is suffering because the patient develops a DVT, probably an ulcer, probably an amputation somewhere along the line, or they die. And in the meantime, everybody's bickering about which risk assessment tool is the best. I know in hospital we've had like Braden scales and Waterloo and this and that and the next. Do everybody use the same scale still? No. So why do we want to make it difficult? It's quite easy. Assess risk and do something about it. Don't put it in file 13. So VTE prophylaxis. So no, you can't prescribe. As a nurse, we can't prescribe. I don't prescribe, well, unless you have, if you work in some other clinic and you work in public and you can prescribe up to Schedule 4, etc. But in general, we do not prescribe, but we administer. So if we know that preventing a blood clot will save the patient's limb and life, we need to make sure that it's prescribed and implemented. It's our job. So we need to make sure to mobilize the patient. But if the patient's not on an anticoagulant because, no, you're low risk, ambulant, alert, mobile, whatever. So low risk, don't worry. And that patient didn't give you all the information right in the start, because patients do that. I don't know if you've noticed. You fill in all those forms and then, like on day 3, if something goes wrong, the patient might say, oh yes, I actually forgot to say, I'm also using this and this and this and this. So yes, we don't get all the information right from the start. That's true. And then we mobilize this patient because we can do that. Although these days I think it's the physios that come mobilize the patients. We don't. And then something goes wrong, and then whose fault is it? When I've looked at hospital documents in a court case, that's also sad. Because we blame shift. We make it the next shift's problem. We don't implement things, and if we don't implement, or if we implement, we don't always write it. Which is sad, because then if I, as a outside objective person, have to go through documents, have to look through hospital documents to prove, to find that little tiny speck of proof that this nurse actually did something, and I can't, then what? Then I have to write in my report, from the documentation it was clear that it was not done. And then the nurse is liable, which is sad, actually. So what is risk assessment? Hopefully I'm not boring you to death yet, and hopefully by the time we've finished you're not thinking, okay, I'm not doing nursing anymore. It's still one of the most noble professions in the world. So, risk assessment is to determine the level of risk of the patient so that we can practice safe strategies to prevent. So risk assessment is to evaluate the patient, the level of risk, so that you can know what to do. So no, it's not to give you more paperwork. It will give you a little bit more paperwork initially, and then later on, it'll be less, because you would have prevented something. So I'm not reading the slides to you. You can see that, because I'm assuming you can all read. But it's sad that only 40 to 50% of medical patients get assessed for risk, and 60 to 75% of surgical patients receive the adequate thromboprophylaxis. Those are things we can prevent. So I do understand that you think, no, it's not within my power to do that. I only work here. No, you're not. You are a nurse and you are your patient's advocate. Remember that. Also, busy slide, lots of information. But it's important that you know that VET screening remains one of the most important risk assessments in the hospital, because so many patients develop VTEs. 76.4%. That's a lot. And a lot of things can go wrong. In wound care as well, we focus on early diagnosis, early intervention. Because you want the patient to be better. You want the patient to walk out there and be well. Because that is our job. It's costly to not prevent it. It costs a lot more money to treat it afterwards than to try and prevent it. Okay. So the administration of VTE prophylaxis is not without risk. Yes, the patient can bleed. There's quite a few things that can happen. But that's right in the beginning, I said, know the risks. Know the risks you're taking. And the only way you're going to know the risk is if you know what you don't know and you know what you know. Okay, we won't go through all of those very long slides. Still have a few to go. So there's a few risk assessment models. I believe some of them were implemented in some of the hospitals previously. I don't know if they are still implemented in some of the hospitals, but it's important that you know how the risk assessment tools work and what they are there for. It needs to be a validated risk assessment tool. If you want to know what a validated one is that if you read on the document, and a lot of very clever people have signed at the bottom, it's validated. So a lot of people have read it and they've said, yes, this measures what we want it to measure. It's validated. So you need to identify risk factors, stratify the risks, so put it in a little block, the red or the yellow or the green or wherever. Identify comorbidities, the absolute ones, the relative ones, other ones, contraindications when you shouldn't be using prophylaxis, and then what treatment will be implemented, the duration of the treatment, and how often, and this is your job, how often it should be checked. That's our job. Check, 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 check. Also a long list, I'm sure you know this. People that are at risk of developing thrombosis, high BMI, if they already come in with a swollen leg, varicose veins. Do you ever check this? If the patient comes into the hospital, I mean, I know we do risk assessment for pressure injuries, but do you check this? Do you know that these are the people that can probably develop a DVT, that can probably die from a pulmonary embolism if I don't pick this up? In casualty, in trauma, wherever, those lists are very long. At 2 o'clock in the morning, it's very difficult to concentrate on all the questions. And sometimes the patient is not alert and mobile, and I can't answer these. So it's your responsibility to know what would be risk factors. And I'm not going to read it to you. There's a few more. Age. As we get older, we get more risks for all sorts of things. At this stage, I'm thinking, when I get to the old age, I'm just going to sort of cover them all in cling wrap and bubble wrap, because for everything that might go wrong. Okay. But it's quick and easy to do prophylaxis. Check, should I, shouldn't I? There's quite a few tools for that as well. would be a good idea to implement that in the hospital. Anybody wants to do like a master's degree or something? That's a good idea to do a master's degree on implementation of such a model into a hospital. Because the model's already there, it's already developed. You can just do an implementation study if you want to go and study further. So common errors we make. We fail to identify the risk. We fail to diagnose. Yes, I know we don't diagnose. We make nursing diagnoses, however. And we have inadequate follow-up. So we've done the little document and then we put it in file 13 and we do not look at it again. Regardless of the fact that the patient might have a high risk, we're not looking in that file. Forget it. And then documentation. I cannot, oh no, that one's back, sorry. I cannot stress this enough. It's tedious, it's painful, it's a lot of hard work. I know I work in a life hospital. We've been trying to go paperless for ages. I'm not 100% sure that we will ever go paperless, in general, in nursing. Because the machines don't do what we want them to do, and you have to have a written document. It has to be written down. So little tick boxes are not validated yet. If you stand there in a court of law, the judge is not going to ask you whether you tick the little box, because anybody can tick the box. They will ask you, what have you written? Where is it written? It doesn't matter if you have the handwriting of a serial killer. That's for someone else to figure out. Make sure you know what you've written there. Because that is your written evidence. No? So you make sure you have evidence. And we now also put everything on camera. It's unbelievable. I still can't get over what people like take photos of and what they make videos of. It's just, that's still, it definitely speaks about my age, but it's just weird. I had a patient now, the mother sort of made videos of everything. And you know, the wound was not in a place where I would, that I would want on a video. But she insisted, because she's making him a scrapbook. Shame. What will the kids say in about 20 years? Why did you have a wound there? Why did you make a video of this? So photographic evidence is also not good enough. It needs to be written down. Documentation, read that last sentence. Documentation reflects the character, the competency, and the care delivered. So if someone reads the notes and it says, dressing done, wow, what does that mean? Legs checked. What does that mean? Was it swollen? Was it red? Have I looked? Have I picked up did you pick up the linen? Did you actually check? Both sides, both legs. Most people still have to, at least, when they walk in or come in. So write down every last word, what you've done, what you didn't do. You also need to write that. This and this and this and this was not checked. Why was it not checked? There was no indication. The risk assessment indicated that the patient is a low risk. This and this and this that need to be implemented according to. So write down everything. Most of the companies dish out pens at the conferences. Get a few. So I think, I don't know what time is it. Are you hungry yet? Okay, so I'm finishing. I'm done with the speech and the philosophy and the whatever. I still think nursing, I love my job. I love treating patients. I love seeing a smile on a patient's face when they get better. I love the fact that some patients come back and say thank you. And you don't always get that, but that one patient can change your life just as you've touched theirs. And if you just do it for one patient, then you've changed someone's world. So that to me is good enough. Always try your best, always. And if you didn't try your best yesterday because you were tired and irritated and the kids irritated you and you were late and everything went wrong, try tomorrow. Try again tomorrow. And I think that's why God gave us night and day. You end the day. I know some work during the night. I'm sorry. I used to. I hated night shift. But you have to. The patient needs you. But that's why there's differences. You can start over. Tomorrow is another day. The sun will come up. So remember your informed consent. Remember your record keeping, confidentiality, availability, and communication. We don't communicate, and that gets us into trouble more often than not. And the way to get started is to quit talking and to begin doing. Implement something. Start something. It's difficult, I know. Going against big guys, big corporates, it's difficult. But start something. Start a little fire somewhere, not literally, but... So, thank you for listening. If I bored you to death, I'm really sorry. Embrace and participate in current and future trends. Read. Maintain best practices so that you can protect your license. No? You like that little paper that Sank sends you every year. We don't acknowledge that, but we do like getting that little paper in the post. And then make the most of every day and have a grateful heart. And I still salute you. So thank you to all the doctors and the nurses. 5 minutes to spare.
Ja, nee.
Lunch. Is it lunch?
Ja, there's no lunch. Thank you. I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed the session. It was a little bit of a different spin. So there was no product features, no benefits, nothing like that. But we thought that it would be a great idea to give back to you. You know, the environment that you are always working in every single day is fraught with risk. But at the end of the day, some new insights and also some refreshers on what you can do to mitigate will affect your daily lives as you are providing that noble quality to your profession. So I'm handing over to Vijay, and thank you for attending the second session. And she will just let you know the arrangements from here, but this then concludes the second clinical session for the morning. Thank you.
So today we've been speaking about a lot of taboo subjects. Pressure injury. You know, I have a colleague, Mark Bates, no Poppy Act, but he's a colleague of mine, and many would know him from the industry, and he always says, pressure injuries is like your brother in jail. Everybody knows you've got a brother in jail, but nobody talks about it. And here, Arjo is saying, if we address it, we have solutions to prevent and manage. Listening to Phoebe, thank you very much, Phoebe. I remember not giving my age away, but 15 years ago, I was in hospital. And being a rep for many years, I think it's even in med school, they don't address even in nursing, much about VTE challenges. And I remember after a week, they could not determine what was wrong with my health, but I know I was brutally ill. And the doctor came to me and he said, we've done your bloods. Sorry for getting you up every morning so early, and your results have returned and you've got thromboembolism. And I remember I was discharged and not having much knowledge about it, but he kept on asking me, are you sure you're not over 60? Are you sure you were only 34? And I was like, at that time, I never knew that mobility is so important. And the early mobility of patients is so important to prevent pressure injuries as well as VTE. And the early mobility actually starts in the hospital, in the ward. So I also want to thank, looking at this slide, we've been thanking our guest speakers, but I must say, you are the caregivers, you are the noble profession, so I want you to give yourselves a hand of applause for getting up every morning, facing the challenges that you do, and there's so much of respect that I have for you. So thank you very much and travel safely. Goodbye, everyone.